Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To some of you and peace out to the rest of you. You already know who it is and who it ain't. It ain't your boy and it is your man, the blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man on social media, signing blacking and shining again. Asking you to hit the mother cuss word share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So here goes this message. Look, so to make a long story short, y'all, I want to tell you straight, you see the title, Disrespect Her Sexual Preferences. And romantic ones too. Just disrespect them. I'm not saying this because I hate women or that I hate black women or even that I hate Western women. I'm telling you to disrespect her preferences because of how much we've learned. Now, some of you knew this long before I did, based on how long you've been in the manosphere versus how long I've not been in it. And that's cool. I didn't know and you did. But because of that, since I've now learned as much as I've learned, I'm just going to go ahead and say now what I can. Really, I'm going to speak the conclusion to which the evidence has led me. And to make a long story short, we've heard a lady, for a long time. Let's look at what they've said about what they want just from the time I got started, so that you understand why I've said this. We heard Aisha Curry say in front of her mother-in-law, which she said back in 2019, a little over 2 years ago. I think it was April that we heard it. She said it, and not only that, but Steph Curry's mother, Aisha's mother-in-law, didn't bat an eye, and she sat right next to her. Now, if a wife of mine sat up and said, if I was married to four and one of them sat up and said something about being jealous of women to whom I ain't even married, and my mother was sitting right there, my mother would have stood up and slapped the piss out of her. Because I ain't gonna front. My mom is one of those ladies that does fight for and defend the men in her life. She started at a young age with her own father. There was a lady that tried to say something, and this is back in the 50s maybe, a lady that worked for my grandfather tried to come to the house and say something, and my mother just happened to be playing under the table and they didn't know it. So she was playing with her little dolls and just listening and eavesdropping. And she said this one time she eavesdropped, got caught and didn't get in trouble because she jumped up from under the table, got in the lady's face and said, "You know my dad didn't do those things." And my mother said, looking back, she thinks that maybe because she just came out from under the table and nobody knew she was there, that the lady might have felt that my mother had eavesdropped even at the office and therefore knew that the lady was lying. So, this was a time when, back in the 50s, when my grandfather, in the Midwest, experienced this whole Me Too thing, or the 1950s version of it. I'm going to tell you all that we've heard. See, that having a mother like that does change your perspective to a certain extent. And one reason why I'm trying to go back this summer is so that I can sit and look my parents in the face and let them know what I've learned, and also so I can say to my mother, "Mom, I really appreciate you going to bat for the men in your life the way you have. You are one of the black women that is worth protecting, not just because you're my mother, but because of how you function as a mother, daughter, grandmom, sister, you see, mother-in-law even. That's why. You are one that would defend black men and women in general. Therefore, you are worth defending even for others. Unfortunately, Mom, what's happened is that my generation and the ones coming up after us have produced a bunch of sisters that ain't even worth protecting. They start fights and then they want us to be their attack dogs and get killed. And they know it. That's why that Bonquisha sent her new boyfriend to shoot her baby daddy in Houston. You ain't a real man if you don't do it. And that man, unfortunately, being raised by nothing but women in these environments, or where they predominate even when they're all men, that man really believed that his options were commit a crime that would get him sent to prison for life to prove his manhood, or don't do it, be free, but then have to live in a community in which all the women say that he ain't no man. Those were his options. And as upped up as that is, that's all there was. I mean, there was really nothing else. I truly feel bad for this man. But by the same token, he's a murderer now. And why I really feel bad is when I think about the one that got shot. Let's look at what else we've heard. We've heard sisters say that they would rather date drug dealers than physicians. We've heard sisters say that they're thinking, well, just recently a lady said, I'm thinking of leaving my man because he don't cheat. We've heard some women say they don't date men that don't have bodies on them. Shortly before these men wind up becoming bodies. We've heard them admit to all of these things, but most telling is that we have heard, even from before this, we have heard women express not only hybristophilic mating preferences, but dual mating strategy and trying to justify it. We heard, what was her name? K. Michelle, I believe, sit up and say on a radio show in Atlanta, just blame the baby on the rich dude and hope that it actually is. We've heard women say, well, if I have to choose between a wealthy man with a shrimp and a broke man with one of them gangster wieners, then I'm going to choose the broke man publicly and cheat with I'm going to choose the wealthy man, the paid man publicly, and I'm going to cheat with the broke dude with the gangster wiener. We've heard a lot of these things, and frankly, this is why, and to one of our sisters, one of our Muslima sisters, one of our hermanas, I'm sorry to have to say this, but we gentlemen need to, number one, don't even have respect for the materialism. Even that. When you're dealing with a Western woman, disrespect her preferences. And I don't mean that you have the right to go and say, I'm going to change them by force. I don't mean that. But what I mean is you have a right to say to them, really you have an obligation to say to them, your preferences are invalid for one reason. And that is because even if you had a right to them, you are so illogical that you have an insistence on things that are mutually exclusive, while you take two things that are not mutually exclusive, looks and attitude, and you refuse to bring a good version of both. Outright, you will not do it. If you look nice, you will not act nice at all. And if you act nice, it's only because you don't look nice. You're sitting up and saying these two could go together. I just refuse to bring them both at the same time. And meanwhile, you sitting up telling men you need to bring these two things even though they're mutually exclusive. The difference is she is insatiable. Everything is wrong. And if she could make the man she wanted, she would get tired of that one in a week. That's why I say, don't respect the preferences of the Westerner. Not the materialism, nor the hybristophilia, nor even their preference for muscles. Consider all of that to be illegitimate, because they are. So, last thing I'm going to tell you is that, you see, when you look at the resources that they want men to have, the resources, well, they want men to have not only the resources, but an abundance of the resources. The resources for which they require abundance, and I mentioned this before, it's basic economics, are already naturally rare. So understand that the women's materialism, even if it is natural, automatically is mutually exclusive in and of itself, because they're saying you must have an abundance of that which is naturally rare. No matter how rare, matter of fact, the more rare they are, the more an abundance of these things works in your favor. But they're not thinking this far. So if you look at the things that they offer in exchange, vaginas everywhere. They all got vaginas. Most have breast, but they got different sizes. So what they're pretty much saying is, if my breasts aren't teeny tiny like a little boy's breast, I'm gonna act with a bad, nasty attitude in exchange. So in addition to having an abundance of that which is already rare, you then got to deal with my nasty, repulsive attitude just because my breast ain't small. That's how they behave. That's their mindset. But they all got breasts, or almost all. They all got vaginas. So that's what they're pretty much saying that you can have in exchange for resources that are already naturally rare. So even their materialism disrespected. The only thing that we should respect is a want for security and a hatred of outright poverty. That's worth respecting because that's something that all human beings, male and female, can't help. We hate danger and we hate poverty largely because it's dangerous. Okay, sure. The hatred of poverty is fine. But even then, they don't have a right to so much as hate or resent the poor man. Because most people gonna be poor, women and men. They have the ability to do these things, and we can accept that this is within their ability, but these are not preferences that we are required to respect. So, when they voice these preferences, straight up say to them, deal with the consequences of your choice. The consequences could be anything from STDs from all being with the same few guys. Walaikum salam. All the way up to being by themselves and dying that way. As Kevin Samuels has said, you're going to die alone. Whatever these things are, just simply say to them, accept the consequences. Your preferences are not valid. They're yours, but they're not valid. You're failing the test, so deal with the consequences of it. Thank you all for listening. Later next time. Assalamu alaikum.